You're such a useless old woman, Mom. How could you forget the one thing I asked you to do? My name is Christina Sullivan, and I was standing in my daughter's kitchen, with 23 family members staring at me in dead silence. My hands were shaking, not from age but from pure rage. My own daughter just humiliated me in front of our entire family. All because I forgot to pick up a Christmas cake from the bakery. 23 people witnessed her calling me useless. Her husband Mike nodded along like I was some burden they tolerated. My grandsons Tommy and Jake looked embarrassed, not of their mother's cruelty, but of me. But here's what Miriam didn't know. What none of them knew as they stared at me like I was some pathetic old fool. That useless old woman had been writing them checks for 15 years straight. Every month. Every crisis. Every time they needed money, they called Grandma Christina. But before I tell you about that Christmas morning that destroyed my family forever, I need you to understand how we got here. Because this story isn't just about one forgotten cake. It's about what happens when your love becomes someone else's weapon. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how a mother's endless giving turned into a daughter's endless taking. And stick around, because you need to hear what Miriam said to me that made me realize I had been living a lie for decades. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had someone in your family treat your kindness like weakness? Because what happened next will shock you. Let me back up 28 years. I became a single mother when Miriam was 3 years old. Her father David walked out on us the day I told him I was pregnant again, with what would have been Miriam's little brother. I lost that baby and David in the same month. 2 devastating losses that left me completely alone with a toddler who kept asking why Daddy wasn't coming home. From that moment, everything I did was for Miriam. I worked double shifts as a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital, came home so exhausted I could barely stand. But I still helped her with homework every single night. I drove her to dance classes, piano lessons, cheerleading practice. I sat in cold gymnasiums and crowded auditoriums cheering for her, while other parents chatted about their weekend plans and date nights. I never dated, never even tried. Other nurses would invite me out, set me up with their brothers or divorced friends, but I always said no. Miriam was my world, and I convinced myself that was enough. That watching her succeed would fill the emptiness David left behind. When she graduated high school with a 4.2 GPA, I was so proud I cried during her entire graduation speech. She wanted to go to state university, out-of-state tuition, $40,000 a year. I emptied my entire retirement fund without hesitation. $48,000 I saved over 15 years of nursing, gone in one tuition payment. But seeing her walk across that campus on move-in day made every sacrifice worth it. When she met Mike sophomore year and came home glowing about this business major who treated her like a princess, I was thrilled. Finally, someone else who would love my daughter the way she deserved. When they decided they wanted a big wedding, the dress, the venue, the flowers, the whole fairy tale, I took out a second mortgage on my house. $27,000 in debt, but Miriam looked like an angel walking down that aisle. When they wanted to buy their first home after graduation, they came to me with those hopeful eyes and nervous smiles. Mom, we found the perfect house, but we need help with the down payment. I gave them my entire inheritance from my parents. $47,000, that was supposed to be my safety net. But watching them get those house keys, seeing Miriam's dream of the white picket fence come true, that felt like safety enough. I told myself this was what mothers do. We sacrifice, we give. We put our children's dreams before our own survival. I told myself that someday, when Miriam was established and secure, when Mike's business took off, when they had everything they needed, they would remember all of this. They would see how much I had given up for their happiness. But somewhere along the way, my generosity became their expectation. My love became their right. And the woman who sacrificed everything for her daughter's dreams slowly disappeared, replaced by someone who existed only to solve their problems with her checkbook. The calls always came the same way. My phone would ring, and I'd see Miriam's name on the screen. Her voice was always honey-sweet and desperate when she needed something. Mom, I hate to ask, but Mike's business was failing again. Just 5,000 to get us through this rough patch. I promise we'll pay you back. Miriam's credit cards were maxed out from shopping sprees she couldn't afford. We'll pay you back, I promise. But if we don't pay this minimum payment, our credit will be ruined forever. Tommy needed braces because his teeth were coming in crooked. You want your grandson to have crooked teeth his whole life? What will people think? Then Jake's car broke down right before his junior year. It's just 3,000 for repairs, Mom. He needs reliable transportation for school and his job. Every request came with guilt, with manipulation, with the unspoken threat that if I didn't help, I was a bad mother and an even worse grandmother. Every month, something new. Every month, I found myself transferring money from my dwindling savings account to theirs. 500 here, 2,000 there, sometimes entire paychecks disappearing into their endless financial emergencies. I stopped getting my hair done at the salon where I'd gone for 20 years. Sandra, my stylist, kept asking where I'd been, but I was too embarrassed to admit I couldn't afford a simple haircut. My car started making this awful grinding noise whenever I turned left, but the repair estimate was $800 I didn't have because I'd just sent Jake money for his class ring. But the worst part wasn't watching my own life shrink to make room for their wants. The worst part was how they treated me when I wasn't writing checks. Miriam would snap at me for giving outdated advice about relationships or money management. Mom, things are different now. You don't understand how the world works anymore. Mike would literally roll his eyes when I tried to share stories about my patients at the hospital or funny things that happened during my shifts. My grandsons barely acknowledged my existence unless they needed gas money or cash for movies. I became the family ATM. They knew exactly which buttons to press to get the cash dispensed, and then they walked away until the next transaction was needed. When I'd called just to talk, just to hear their voices, Miriam would cut the conversation short. Mom, I'm really busy right now. Can we talk later? But later never came unless they needed something. The only time my phone rang with their number was when their bank account was empty. Still, I told myself this was temporary. That once Mike's consulting business finally took off, once the boys were older and more independent, once Miriam felt more financially secure, they would remember who I really was underneath all those bank transfers. They see me as more than just a bank account with legs and a heartbeat. I was so naive. Because what I didn't realize was that I wasn't building their security, I was building their dependency. And worse than that, I was teaching them that my love could be measured in dollar amounts, and that my worth as a human being was directly tied to how much I could give them. I was training them to see me as nothing more than their personal emergency fund, and they were excellent students. 3 months before Christmas, something shifted. Miriam's demands became crueler. Instead of Mom, I hate to ask, it became, Mom, we need 500 for groceries this week. No please, no thank you, just expectation. Mike started making comments about how I was getting forgetful and maybe shouldn't be living alone. The boys started avoiding my calls entirely. Then came the November incident. I was having dinner at their house, dinner I paid for, and I accidentally knocked over Jake's soda. It barely spilled, but Miriam exploded. Mom, you're becoming a liability. You can't even sit at a table without making a mess. We're worried about you driving, living alone, managing your finances. Managing my finances. The irony was suffocating. That's when Mike chimed in with his solution. Maybe it's time to look into assisted living, Christina. Somewhere safe where professionals can take care of you. They had brochures. Actual glossy brochures for Sunset Manor and Golden Years Community. $8,000 a month. Places that would require me to sell my house, the house I'd lived in for 30 years. I realized they weren't just bleeding me dry financially. They were planning to warehouse me somewhere convenient while they divided up whatever was left of my assets. But I smiled, nodded, and said I'd think about it. Because I was already forming a plan of my own. Hit that subscribe button if you think families should protect each other, not prey on each other. Because what I discovered next will shock you. Tell me in the comments, have you ever realized someone you trusted was planning behind your back? So we were back to Christmas morning. I didn't forget that cake by accident. I forgot it because I had been forgetting a lot of things lately. Like why I kept enabling people who treated me like garbage. After I told Miriam to stop calling me for money, she went completely silent. Then she started laughing. Not a funny laugh, but a mean, ugly sound that made my blood freeze. You think you have power here, Mom? You're a lonely, pathetic old woman who buys love because you're too bitter to earn it any other way. 23 family members watched her scream at me. Tommy looked horrified. Jake started crying. But Miriam wasn't done. She grabbed the wooden angel from her mantle, the one I had carved by hand 10 years ago, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. You want to cut us off? Fine, but don't come crawling back when you're dying alone in some nursing home because nobody loves you. Mike stepped forward. Christina, leave, now. Before you upset the children more. As if I was the one screaming and throwing things, then Miriam said something that stopped my heart. Don't bother coming back. Ever. We're done pretending we want you around. Pretending. 30 years of family dinners, birthday parties, holidays. They had been pretending the entire time. That's when I called 911. Not because I was scared, but because I needed witnesses. Because what I was about to do next needed documentation. After 30 years of being the family bank, it was time for an audit. The police arrived in 8 minutes. Officers Amslam and Thompson, both professional and calm. Miriam immediately tried to play the victim, telling them how I had been acting erratically and making threats about money. She put on this sweet, concerned daughter act that would have fooled anyone who didn't know the truth. But here's what Miriam didn't know. I had been recording our conversations for 3 months, every phone call begging for money. Every cruel comment about my age, my memory, my usefulness. Every discussion about forcing me into a nursing home so they could access my assets. Officer Amslam asked if there had been any financial abuse in the relationship. I handed him my phone. Miriam's voice came through crystal clear from last month. Mom, if you don't help us with this mortgage payment, we might lose the house. And if we lose the house, where exactly do you think you're going to live? We're your only family, remember? Mike's voice from 2 weeks ago. Christina's getting confused about money lately. Maybe we should help her manage her accounts, for her own protection. Jake's voice from yesterday. Grandma, I need $500 for Christmas gifts, and Mom said you're good for it because you feel guilty about being such a burden. 23 family members listened to every word. My sister Linda looked like she was going to be sick. Miriam's face went completely white. Mike kept saying, that's taken out of context, but the context was crystal clear. Then I dropped the real bomb. I pulled out the folder I had been carrying in my purse, the one Miriam assumed was just more of my old lady junk. Inside were bank statements, transfer receipts, canceled checks, 15 years of financial records showing exactly how much money I had given them. $237,000, nearly $250,000, drained from my retirement, my savings, my emergency fund. Money I would never see again, given to people who had just told me they never wanted to see me again. Officer Thompson whistled low under his breath. Miriam frantically tried to explain, but there was nothing to explain. The numbers didn't lie, and neither did the recordings. The room turned into a courtroom, and Miriam was losing badly. Uncle Jim, who had never liked Miriam's entitled attitude, started asking pointed questions. So let me get this straight. You've been taking money from your mother for 15 years and then calling her useless? Cousin Beth wanted to know why I had never said anything. My sister Linda was crying, apologizing for not seeing what was happening right in front of her. But the real justice came from an unexpected source. Tommy, my 16-year-old grandson. Mom, is this why Grandma's car sounds like that? Because she gave us her car money? His voice was small, ashamed. Is this why she always brings lunch in a brown bag when she takes us places? Because she can't afford restaurants anymore. Miriam tried to shut him up, but Tommy was on a roll now. And what about when you told everyone at school that Grandma was getting senile? And we might have to put her somewhere? You weren't worried about her safety. You were planning this. Jake jumped in. Mom, you told me Grandma wanted to give me money for Christmas gifts. You said she insisted. But she didn't know, did she? These boys weren't stupid. They had been watching, listening, putting pieces together. And now they were horrified by what they saw. Mike tried to control the situation. Kids, go to your rooms. This is adult business. But Tommy stood his ground. No, Dad, this is my grandmother, and you've been stealing from her. That word, stealing, hung in the air like smoke. Because that's exactly what it was. Financial elder abuse, dressed up as family love. Officer Amslam explained that this was indeed a criminal matter. That elder financial abuse was a felony. That the recorded conversations and financial records constituted evidence of a pattern of manipulation and coercion. Miriam started crying, not from shame, but from fear. Because she was finally realizing that her ATM machine had just turned into a prosecutor, and there was nowhere left to hide. I didn't press criminal charges, though Officer Amslam strongly encouraged me to. Instead, I did something that hurt Miriam much more than jail time would. I disappeared from their lives completely. I moved across the country to Oregon, where I bought a small cottage near the coast with what was left of my money. I changed my phone number, closed my old bank accounts, and left no forwarding address. For the first time in 30 years, I belonged to myself. The silence was terrifying at first. No phone calls demanding money, no crisis to solve. No one needs me to fix their problems. I had to learn how to exist without being someone's solution. The boys found me eventually. Tommy turned 18 and tracked me down through social media. He drove 12 hours with Jake to apologize, to explain, to rebuild something real. They spent that first summer with me, learning to fish, helping me plant my garden, discovering who their grandmother actually was when she wasn't being bled dry. Tommy told me he had confronted his parents after that Christmas. He had demanded to know how much money they had taken from me over the years. When Miriam refused to answer, he moved out and got his own job to pay for college. Miriam called me once, 2 years later. Her voice was different, smaller, desperate, in a way that had nothing to do with money. Mike had left her when his business finally failed completely. She was working 2 jobs, struggling with the mortgage I had helped her get, raising the boys mostly alone. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to explain. She wanted me to understand that she had never meant to hurt me, that she had just been scared and overwhelmed, and didn't know how to ask for help without asking for money. I listened to all of it. Then I told her something that had taken me 72 years to learn. Miriam, I loved you so much that I forgot to love myself. I gave you so much that I disappeared. That wasn't healthy for either of us. She asked if I would ever forgive her. I told her I already had. That's why I had to leave. Forgiveness doesn't mean going back to being someone's emergency fund with a pulse. I hung up the phone and walked out to my garden, where tomatoes were growing strong and nobody needed anything from me except sunshine and water. For the first time in decades, I was exactly where I belonged. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is teach people to solve their own problems, even when those people are your children. Even when it breaks your heart to do it. Tell me in the comments, do you think I was right to cut off my daughter completely, or should love always come with second chances? If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.